Only a candle was glimmering in the small dark room, and a howling wind was distinct outside. It was a real cruel Russian winter that year. A little boy was sitting inside, in the corner of the room near the bed. A music box was resting in front of him, which he winded up again and again, not wanting to hear the chaos outside. Neither the wind nor the quarrel that infiltrated from the corridor. He picked up the box, and a pleasant, soft melody started to play again soon. The shouting was coming even closer, the sobbing of a woman and determined, furious steps which were coming near the door. The boy tightened a thin blanket on himself to warm his body a little. The slight t-shirt and jeans he was wearing didn't serve too much heat. He clenched his lips because he didn't want his quiet whimpering to turn into a loud crying, even if he knew he's going to get something he didn't deserve. But there was nothing he could do. A criminal knew no mercy. Then the door opened with a loud snap, and the boy didn't even have time to flinch. The man had already grabbed his arm and tugged him up from the ground.
Let him go!
A slim woman rushed to them with breathless voice from sobbing. Her sentences were hard to understand.
Leave him, please! He's just a child! Don't take him away!
He's already lived more than an insect like this deserves. The man violently pulled the crying boy out of the room. The woman had fallen on her knees and clasped her hands around his legs to stop him.
Nikolai! I'm begging you!
The mafioso shot a merciless glance at the defenseless woman, then spitted toward her direction and pushed her to the ground with a determined kick. A quiet screaming escaped from the little boy's throat as he saw his crying mother falling on her back with bleeding head.
Don't take my son away!
Her sentence turned into an articulate screaming.
Alcazay!
The man had twitched the fragile boy to the backyard of the building and pushed him to the ground. Teardrops had frozen on the face of the trembling child, and he closed his eyes so he wouldn't accidentally look at the mafioso. His whole body was shaking, and a strange caustic feeling was stretching his chest. Maybe this will be different from the other beatings. Perhaps he won't survive this one. Start begging, you little shit! The man spitted toward him and took out a pistol from his pants. The boy clenched his lips, trying to hold in his breaking in sob. Why would he beg? It would be a pleasant compliment for a cool-blooded murderer to see his victim bowing and scraping. He's not going to walk into a trap. He won't beg and pray for his life, because it would be a coward and useless act. Nikolai Glazov was the most merciless person in the surroundings. Why would he have pity on his life? I said, beg for me! He shouted at the child and kicked him in the face to the ground. His head started bleeding immediately. Maybe it had broken from the huge force, but he didn't say a word. Neither had he cried. A quiet whining escaped from his mouth, just like he was a defenseless puppy. But he stayed mute. Nikolai had slowly squatted down in front of him and pressed the barrel to his forehead. As you wish. Alcazay opened up his eyes to shoot a last glance at his stepfather, and then saw the disgusting smirk on his face, which he hadn't forgotten even after, and then the man pulled the trigger. It was cold, freezing cold. Howling sounded from the distance. The animals had smelled the scent of blood and took the road to find its source. The sound of a small music box was trying to lower the rumbling chaos of the external world, to give some peace to the boy lying on the ground. He was bleeding and wounded, but he was living, in spite of the pain, the blood loss, and the bullet which broke through his skull. The boy still wasn't able to die. He was lying near an empty road, wearing a light t-shirt and jeans, and nothing else embraced his little body but the freezing snow and his almost cold blood, which painted everything red around him. There was an old couple walking towards him on the road. They were going to their warm and calm home after their visit in a nearby village. As they saw the boy, they started running to make sure if they could help him, and the old couple headed back to the village with the frozen child immediately. XXxCyberDiamondXxX didn't feel the progress of time, nor did that somebody touch him. The only thing he couldn't erase from his mind was the disgusting smirk of his stepfather and the soft melody of the little music box. 10 years later, a brown-haired boy with a shabby, bloody bandage stood in front of that building where everything should have ended, but everything had started instead, where they broke him in order to be reborn. A slight smile was wandering on his face while he checked even the last door to make sure he had locked them properly. Then he pulled out a box of matches from his pocket, lit every one of them and plugged them under the window frame nicely in a fair row. All of them, when there was no room under the window frame. He took a step to the side to continue his operation with the doors until he ran out of matches. The flames quickly engulfed the entire building. Screams and terrified shouts could be heard from inside. XXxCyberDiamondXxX took a step back with a wide smile on his face and started laughing. He imagined the torments and the pain the criminals felt trapped in the building. The way the smoke stings their eyes, the poisonous gases enter their lungs, and the sound as their flesh melts from their worthless bones. He imagined the weapon stored inside blowing up because of the heat, and the cartridges penetrating the eye and the brain of someone standing near. And he felt that his life never had been as happy as then, when he realized that this chapter of his life ended. His past was over. Alexei Glazov was over. He hadn't existed anymore.
You're back, dear.
The old lady turned to the door as the boy entered. He nodded and took his way to the room he called his own. "What would you like for dinner, Alexei?" asked the old man, but his wife corrected him immediately.
Don't call him that. You know he doesn't like this name.
Really? What did you say? How does he like to be called? The woman turned back to the fireplace and continued cooking.
Mindcracker.
Mindcracker, repeated her husband. I'm wondering which movie does this silly name come from.
Who knows, dear?
The old lady smiled at him.
He's just a child. If this makes him happy, we have to accept it.
The man shrugged and continued reading his newspaper. I guess we do. The boy was listening to them while laying on his bed and smiled. Just a child. It's better that way. His new family was in a blissful ignorance. They didn't have too much left for them. Maybe 5 years, or 6. He's going to act like an innocent child until then. He was that defenseless little boy for them, still, who they found and covered in blood near the road in the snow. He's going to be alright for those few years. He could continue acting like that child. And then, he could finally release that one he really was. Mindcracker. He put one of his hands under his head as he looked at the cracks running through the ceiling. Crack. Crack. He repeated quietly, then closed his eyes and smiled a bit. Everything was calm and peaceful. He didn't even hear the howling wind outside. Just like a little music box was lowering the noises of the world.